Hello, welcome everyone, particularly those who may be new to Achates Inspires and Achates Live. Just a reminder, this session has been recorded and the first broadcast is at 1 p.m. on the 16th of April. So if you are watching that broadcast, some of our Achates colleagues are on hand to answer any questions that you might have. Just pop them in the comments section below. Achates, in case you're not aware of us, is a strategy, fundraising, organizational change, and recruitment company. And we're really delighted that you can be here today for the first of two joint Achates Inspires and live sessions, exploring the topic of challenging times, calls for creative solutions. And today we'll be particularly touching on the concept of alternative income generation in the cultural sector. So first, just to give you a little bit of a background into our Achates Live and Inspires sessions, over the last 10 years, Achates as an organisation has provided provocation and inspiration to organisations and individuals within the sector, providing expert, market disruptor and inclusive thinking across strategy, recruitment and fundraising. In 2019, we set up Achates Live to support the sector by bringing fundraisers and other arts fundraising professionals together to discuss key fundraising topics and to enable you to help and support each other. As the sector continued to emerge from the pandemic and face new challenges and opportunities, we felt there was never a greater need for the ability to come together and find solutions. And in 2023, we launched Achates Inspires as a new peer network for senior individuals. Achates Inspires provides a cross-arts forum for chief executive directors, and other senior leaders to learn together, hearing from expert voices on new opportunities across the sector and to provide a peer learning network to pool expertise. In doing so, we plan to build on the art form networks that existed before and as a result of the pandemic to provide our leaders in the sector with support from peers, but moving to a cross-art form, culture sector-wide platform. And so, on to today. As mentioned, we will be exploring how the sector can be working across alternative income streams in the face of such a complicated and challenging financial climate. And I'm delighted today to be joined by two incredible leaders in the sector to discuss just their experiences of that topic. Peggy Hughes, Chief Executive of the National Centre for Writing, joined us. If I could just say hello to Peggy, if you could unmute and say hello.
Hello, delighted to be here. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you. And Amy Vaughan, Executive Director of Battersea Arts Centre. Amy, could you say hello?
Hi, Vicky. Lovely to be here.
Thank you both so much. I'm really looking forward to your insights today. And so just to give us a little bit of context as to why we're here to talk about this point today, it's not news to say that the last few years have been turbulent for the cultural sector, particularly from a financial perspective. Organisations of all scales and across all art forms across the entire country are facing ever-increasing challenges to balance their budgets. At the end of 22-23's financial year, 73 of the highest funded NPOs in England made a significant loss, with just 27 reporting a surplus. And this isn't an unusual position if you look at the wider sector. We're facing a financial crisis like never before, and events of the last 5 years could be seen as simply acting as the spark that's lit the bonfire. Costs are going up. Government funding from both central and local pots continues to decline rapidly, and giving to culture represents just 1% of UK giving, which is down from 2% in previous years. So today marks the first of an important two-part conversation, exploring what positive action organisations can take to address the challenges we're facing as a result of this complex financial landscape. And today we'll be exploring alternate ways of generating income and hearing from Amy and Peggy's experiences and the organisations they lead who have seen some success by innovating their business model. Next month, the session will explore ethical questions that many of us are facing around income generation and fundraising, and we'll explore how to navigate the considerations we must take when receiving income and how to ensure those considerations remain driven by purpose, especially when money is particularly tight. We're really delighted today to bring together our Achates Live and Inspires audiences to tackle these critical topics, which impact so many of us across the sector and within our organisations. The last few years have shown us that the current dominant model of funding, which relies heavily on statutory income and fundraising, is no longer fit for purpose. And true resilience requires us to turn to the one thing this sector does better than any other: creativity. it's crucial that organisations take a creative and purpose-led approach to our business models. We must do away with the expectation that government funding will grow, or that we can solely rely on fundraising to plug the increasing gaps, and begin to explore how else we might generate income. What role might social impact funding play in the mix, for example, or alternative commercial income generation that isn't just trying to work our box office and our bars or cafe sales harder and harder? Many organisations in the sector have made great strides towards achieving a more balanced approach to earned and contributed income, looking creatively at their assets and resources to establish new income streams which speak to both organisational purpose and the audiences they serve. But how did they do it? Why did they do it? Was it driven by a creative idea or born out of absolute necessity? I'm really delighted to be joined by Peggy and Amy today to dive into these very questions. So before we start and hear from them, I just want to give you a little bit of background into who they both are. So Peggy has been Chief Executive of the National Centre for Writing since September 2023. Before taking up this role, she was Executive Director from January 22 and Head of Programmes from 2017 to 2022. She comes from Northern Ireland, went to university in Scotland, and stayed to spend her formative years in literature organisations, including the Edinburgh International Book Festival and the Edinburgh UNESCO City of Literature Trust. Peggy sits on various boards, including Age UK Norwich and Open Book Reading Scotland, and interviews writers at festivals and events around the UK and Ireland. She was elected an Honorary Fellow of the Royal Society for Literature in 2023, bestowed on individuals who have made a significant contribution to the advancement of literature. And Amy has worked in the cultural sector for nearly 30 years, and her passion and further study has focused on organisational change and dynamics. Her background is in arts venues and venue management, with the bulk of her career spent in multi-art form venues presenting a wide range of performance and community activity on both subsidised and commercial financial models. She worked for 9 years at Arts Council England as Director of Touring and East of England, and laterally Director of Change Programmes, where she led on the development of the Arts Council investment principles, which we will all be so very familiar with, and the Creative Health Strategy. Alongside her current role as Executive Director at Battersea Arts Centre, she runs a freelance business as an organisational development advisor, and her focus is mainly small to medium cultural organisations looking to grow or change. Amy is also the current chair of the London Theatre Consortium, a 14-strong MPO venue consortium, taking a collaborative approach to business and workforce development. So thank you both for joining us today. And I wondered if I could kickstart our discussion by asking you both to speak in turn about the ways in which your individual organisations have sought to earn income from alternative sources and what those programmes have looked like for you. Amy, would you like to kick us off?
Certainly. So I guess here at Battersea, the big income generator in terms of the sort of asset that we sweat the most is the building. And I think with any organisation, that's the first step, is actually what can the asset that you have, what assets do you have, and what can they do for you, you know, when you're sort of thinking outside of what your subsidy and your charitable mission is, you know, what else can you do? And so here the focus has really been on the building, and it has been long before I got here, just to be really clear, long before I got here, a huge part of the business model for BAC. So it generates, I mean, over the years it's fluctuated massively, and I should say it also burnt down in 2015. So that was obviously a massive moment within this organization's history that actually completely changed the trajectory, because actually the building went from being something, and this specifically the Grand Hall, which is a large space at the back of the site, went from being a kind of quite a nice large space that could be used for a lot of different things to something really quite unique, which had a real sort of it was a real point of differentiation for BAC to have this space. And so since that has been reopened, which was in 2018, it's been this kind of year-on-year development of how actually do you use that space in a way that really, really maximizes its potential. Obviously, like everybody, there was a good 2-year chunk out of that time to develop that with the pandemic. But even in the pandemic, BAC pivoted to be a vaccination centre. So again, what can the building do for us? How can we use it in a really clever way? So I would say that, I guess, since I've arrived, kind of coming in and seeing this place with this incredible asset and a really, really strong team that run the commercial enterprise arm of the charity, what we've been able to do is really take that potential and refine it and refine it and refine it, so that we've gone from a sort of catch-all enterprises business that's quite opportunistic to something which is really quite strategic. And by that, I mean, we've really refined what it is that sells well here, what gives us the maximum return on investment, how do we keep the kind of overhead of that enterprises business at a level which feels sustainable within the broader organization. Because I think, and it'll be interesting to know what the experience is at the new writing center, but that kind of that thing where sometimes the commercial side can take over everything, and what you want is to feel like you're a charity with a commercial arm, not a commercial business running a charity. And we're really, really cognizant here of that balance and keeping that right. But I think the really important point to make is that what we've realized over the years, and something that I picked up and learned to value very quickly when I came here, was actually your commercial business can only be as good as the resource and the capacity that you pump into it. So yeah, finding that balance between how big is that team, how much time and capacity can you give them to really make the kind of income that you need to generate. And this year, going into 24, 25, that income is at about 52% of our total model. Which and to be totally transparent, anyone can look at the accounts that we're filing. You know, we're not there yet. We're on a journey. But the growth of that model is undoubtedly the bedrock of our ongoing and future life, because we have a pay what you can ticket system, which represents about 9% of our income. So actually that thing about sweating, what you were saying earlier about like sweating the box office really, really hard, well, there is no sweating to be done there for us, because our charitable purpose is one of creating access to theatre. So we don't want to put our ticket prices right up. So that's a non-event. So actually it's all about the commercial income generation, and that absolutely comes from the building. So there's a lot I can talk about like how we've zoned the building, how we kind of go through all of that, the sort of how we make decisions about what the space gets used for and when and why and by who. But in a sense, I suppose, just in terms of how we've really pushed up that income, it is that commercial income generated by the building that we've really, really focused on. And then I suppose the other thing, which we might touch on a little bit, is also growing our corporate sponsorship as well. Because actually, even though corporates are coming in because of our charitable objectives, the fact that we have this building is part of the offer, it's part of cultivation. And the fact that we can throw great Christmas parties and we can offer really good buyouts and things like that is kind of the whole thing interlinks. And yeah, we're beginning to see the green shoots, I think, of that, of bringing that all that kind of thinking together.
Thank you so much, Amy. I've got so many questions about some of this, but I don't want to dive into those just yet until we've heard from Peggy in the first instance. So if I can park those for a second, we're scribbling them down as we've been chatting. We'll definitely come back to them. Peggy, could you just speak a little bit to your experience there of this sort of alternative sources, and then I'll dive in with all of my questions, because I imagine I'll have lots for you as well.
Certainly. Wow, I could just listen to Amy all day though, and we're we're at the very early stages of our journey as a venue as well. So I think there's lots I could learn from what you're saying. I think I think I'd like to just say a little bit about National Centre, because I figure it might be a lesser understood concept than Battersea Arts. So just to situate us and what we are. We are a contemporary literature house, homed in a 15th century medieval sort of trading, grade one listed trading hall on the banks of the River Wensum in Norwich, which is England's first UNESCO City of Literature. And the organisation started life in 2004, really as a writer development agency for the East of England. But while we were rooted in East Anglia, I think that we were very much always open to the world and worked in really wide partnership for the art form. And so then a rebrand in 2018 to National Centre for Writing from Writer Centre Norwich, really, and that predates me, I should say, the backstory. But it really represented a stronger fit for our ambitions and intentions and the partnerships that were happening here. So we like to say where once we traded sort of textiles and spices, and now we work in the exchange of words and ideas and stories. And the program, like Amy was saying, our work is supported by a very broad sort of mixed economy model of statutory wide basket of funders, of statutory funders, trusts and foundations, individual giving. We've got a commercial income stream via our building, which is a really prized building in Norwich terms. It's, as I say, medieval. It has been dendro dated. Via the sort of beams in the Great Hall to suggest it was built in 1427. So it's seen a lot of life, this building, and a lot of people really love to use it. We have all sorts of commercial purpose happening here. We've actually got a sort of suite of opportunities around meet, marry, and celebrate and party like it's 1427. So that's a growing area for us. But I think the program I wanted to talk about today, I was tasked with sort of bringing today was is a program called NCW Academy. And that's effectively a suite of courses, workshops, and mentoring online and in person, in the building and elsewhere, in real time and asynchronous. So I'm just going to maybe unpack a little bit about how that program started, because I think it'll give a bedrock for what we talk about next. So it sort of started in 2013 in close partnership with the University of East Anglia. And I'm sure a lot of people tuning in here will perhaps know that the University of East Anglia has an amazing offer around creative writing. It was the first university in the UK to offer creative writing, founded in 1970. Fact, Ian McEwan was the first and solo student on the inaugural course. And it continues, to be a great partner for us and world leading. And we were already committed partners with them in other areas of our work, but specifically this partnership around creative writing online came about to basically support the continuation of a series of lifelong creative writing courses that I think were sort of near end of life, and it was a way to try and continue and to maintain them in partnership with us. So the model worked at using their staff expertise, existing sort of pedagogical framework, and their brand Imprimatur, to offer this non-accredited, very importantly, non-accredited set of courses. It wasn't part of the university, kind of offer in that sense. And we, I believe, at the time had wanted to pursue that direction of travel, and it made sense to partner in this way to combine the UEA's expertise and our, ambitions and sort of marketing muscles and audience reach and things. And effectively, in the very early days, it was to test a proof of concept, is my understanding. So. The program then, it was simply a small suite of taught online courses. It was very close to the UEA's own model, 12 to 24 weeks in real time with a tutor. And it was very aligned, very locked into the sort of semester dates and using UEA alumni and UEA staff to teach it. The courses largely covered their own costs. And if any surplus was generated, that was sort of shared equally. And in our case, we plowed that back into our free learning and participation work. But skipping ahead to the present moment, we've come quite some way from there, insofar as we still do the creative writing online, now called taught online courses, as part of what we now call NCW Academy. But I mean, the Academy has now expanded beyond that partnership. And just to sort of speak in some detail about what we now offer, it's a suite of creative opportunities. We have still taught online courses, 12 to 24 weeks, across all sorts of genres, just all sorts. I can go into that in detail later if people would like. We have workshops and masterclasses. They're largely in the building, and we've got this great building here. I'm sitting in our little classroom space, which seats sort of 22 people, but we've got other pockets. We've got a cottage here. We've got a venue upstairs that seats 120, so we can do masterclasses that are for 50 people and smaller, more intimate courses. We have mentoring online, which really responds to a very direct need for people to have that kind of opportunity to really test their writing in much more detail and much more specifically one-to-one. We have live evening courses there in the building, so they're sort of maybe a 12-week course around sort of beginner writing for beginners or intermediate. A new part of that suite is online self-paced courses. So that again was really listening to what people wanted, and it wasn't always that they wanted to meet on a Monday or to adhere only to a very strict regimen set down by us. They wanted to be able to engage with the content much more asynchronously. So we responded to that, and then sitting underneath all of that is a very big bank of free resource sort of stuff. Writers Hub, so called, and the Writing Life podcast, and our podcast, has I think 120,000 listens per year at this rate. So it's a very big generator of that audience base for the sort of pyramid of work. So I thought it was useful just to go into that level of detail because I think a lot of what we're trying to do with that course is sort of correlates to what we're saying about business modeling, about listening to what our audiences want and need, about listening to tutor and to participant feedback, about testing the market and sort of looking at what's out there. And like Amy, it wouldn't be possible without an absolutely brilliant team that we have here, and working really closely together on that work. It's a very sort of cross-team effort, and a very big piece of our work. So maybe I'll leave it there and hand back to you, Vicky, having hopefully set the scene.
Thank you, Peggy. That's really helpful and really interesting. And actually, what really strikes me is, you both spoke about quite different programs there, but actually there were some really similar themes that kind of came up that I think it would be quite nice to kind of unpack as we kind of go through. The first one that I'd really love to get your perspectives on, and you both kind of alluded to this a little bit, is, obviously as charities, as often charities in receipt of public funding, this idea of our central purpose, we are arts organizations, we have, is key. It's why we receive that public funding and why we are right to do so, why we are able to fundraise. How, from your perspectives, developing these programs, how have you internally and kind of ensured that it's never at the expense of that sort of central purpose? Because obviously that is often what can happen, or you hear sort of people kind of being worried about developing more commercial income streams but it'll take away from our ability to do X with this particular group. What's been your kind of experiences of kind of managing that question and then kind of holding that balance as it were? Peggy, do you want to start with that?
Yes, it's a very interesting question, as Amy's touched on already. It's really, really important for us and I think for the sector not to let the tail wag the dog. So we like to say, we're not the National Centre for Weddings, we're the National Centre for Writing. So while weddings are really important and really valued, sort of straight weddings in particular, other commercial hires too, but it has to be in balance, doesn't it? And I think for us, our central mission really is creating opportunities for writers to learn and develop and to thrive and connect. That's at the heart of what we do. And I think the NCW Academy really sort of allows us to do that actually and to expand or ways of doing that in several ways. I talked at the top about being a writer development agency, a talent development centre. I think these courses, we know from feedback and from listening very hard across the years, we know that they've led to publication, they've led to prizes. Enrollment on undergraduate and MA sort of creative writing courses beyond the Life of Our course, and also for us for further engagement with NCW and with as writers and as alumni of the academy. So that's one really key piece. A big bit for us is supporting resilient careers and creating opportunities for writers to thrive. There's no point in us giving them these courses and then saying, that's it. There's no further, it's to try and, kind of create opportunities for them to make money and to see value in their work. NCW Academy creates paid work for about 80 artists a year across something like 134 workshops, 37 new commissions. So it's a really sizable bit of work for the artists we're supporting. We like to think around encouraging a life with writing. What does that mean to give people the skills and the confidence to embrace a life with writing in it? And so we strive to make sure that it's a positive experience, that feedback shows us that people do leave our courses having increased skills and knowledge in the area and feel more able to embark on a life as a writer, whatever that means to them, by the way. It doesn't always mean they're going to find publication or would want to, but it might mean more confidence, more connection. Enabling people of all contexts to be able to tell their story. Obviously, at at the heart of our work is the idea of writing and story making is transformational in its power to change lives and hearts and minds. And so bridging that creative imagination with the skills needed to do that, is really seismic and fundamental. And that's something that our courses do. It brings an opportunity for us to work across several key, I mean, we're, yes, based here, but we have a footprint across the region and nationally and obviously, and internationally as well. So this work goes beyond borders, which is great. We aim to try and reduce barriers to participation in all we do at NCW, to ensure that the writers that are having the opportunity to develop are doing so from all contexts, all perspectives, voices, and I think these opportunities do, insofar as they start with lots of free content, free resources. That anything that is priced has been priced to sort of reflect a range of budgets and purses. And we've got more of that to come, which I might come back to. And then the fact that a lot of it's available online, that reduces a barrier in terms of people being able to access us from wherever and however they are, from the comfort of their own environment. So that's a really important factor as well. And then just to be really resilient, I mean, we're touching on this as across the course of the whole conversation, but for us to be resilient as an organization does mean, kind of growing in the areas where we can and raising our earned revenue potential to support our work and to plow that back into keeping a lot of the other work free. So that's all really important. But just coming back to the point about commercial, I think that we're really keen in this building, being the place that people might choose to be married, that's also part of the message, that in choosing to hire us and not some other medieval building in Norwich, there are others are available. But they're supporting our work. They're supporting the work of developing writers, and that's really huge. And in that we. For example, if you choose to get married here, sorry, it's a hard sell, but you get a bespoke set of books selected for you by me based on what you tell us, and that's to start your married sort of bookshelf together. So it's sort of creating a full picture and not just bolting something on to what we do.
Thanks, Peggy. That's really interesting. And I think, it's not a surprise that someone leading the National Centre for Writing is sort of nailing that kind of whole idea of how important it is to tell our stories as a sector. And that was really inspiring to hear. Amy, what about your kind of perspective on that sort of purpose-driven kind of approach to this generation of commercial income?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just echo about the weddings. We exactly the same thing. If you get married here, in fact, it's anything, isn't it? If you hire this space, if you use this space for your event, this is what you're supporting. Look at this charity, look at what it does, what it achieves, the people that it reaches. And that message is really writ large throughout everything that we sell, I guess. And I'd also say one of the things that we grapple with quite a lot is how the commercial business aligns with the ethical fundraising policy as well, because that's like just another thing to unpack with this, is that actually if you've got a building that's being used consistently by a lot of different clients, the way that you can stress test income through fundraising is quite contained. The way that you can stress test income through multiple clients that are coming through the building all the time is a little bit harder and a little bit more complicated. So just to put that out there. But going back to the question, I think there's a level of pragmatism that we all have to have at the moment, which is our funding levels are the same as they were 15 years ago, and what you could do with that funding 15 years ago compared to now is it's incomparable, and so sometimes when I think about this, and we have quite a lot of very honest, hopefully transparent conversations, particularly with artists that we work with, when we're having to say that room isn't available, like we can't use that room, and that sort of feeling, often an external perception that perhaps we will value commercial income over working with artists. What we had to do to kind of really stop that, because it's not true, but there is a realism about, but we do have to dedicate X amount of time in this building to generating commercial income in order to still be here next year. Like we can't argue about it. We just have to do it. So what we've tried to do is develop much more kind of transparent ways of communicating about that. So we did this zoning of the building. So previously it was very, oh, so-and-so's in there and so-and-so's in that room. And there's a lot of rooms at BAC. So for anyone that hasn't been here, there's the big grand hall at the back, and then there's the municipal old town hall building at the front, and that has about 10 different spaces in it, which are all usable for different purposes. And so what we did was we zoned it, and we said, right, these rooms belong to the creative team, these rooms belong to the communities, and these rooms belong to the enterprises team. And they can trade them between each other, but they know who's got what room, and they know how much. I know in my head, every single room, how much we can lose on those rooms and how much we can earn from those rooms. And the rooms that we can earn the most from, we've given to enterprises. It's like, it's a kind of quite a straightforward equation. And those rooms all have a target against them. And those rooms all have a kind of strategy as to how we use them to best effect. And then what we can do is we can look across the whole thing and check the balance in terms of the charitable activity versus the commercial activity. And in the main, it's absolutely fine, because actually the way that those teams now interact with each other and kind of really understand where the parameters are has been hugely useful. But also in thinking then about capital, for example, we're able to really drill down into what is actually needed in those rooms to help those different teams and the work that they're doing really fly. And for the commercial side, it's like, well, you guys earn enough money. If you want to do that room up, you do that room up. For the creative side, it's like, what will make this a really state-of-the-art, fit for purpose studio suite that we would feel really, really proud of for emerging UK artists and incoming international artists, and how do we make our community spaces feel incredibly community owned? And like, because we can do that because we've zoned them off and we're really clear about what their purpose is. And we're also then really clear about what each of them costs, what their climate impact is. Like, we can begin to really like compartmentalize everything in a way that that has felt really, really useful. I think it's probably been one of the kind of best decisions we've made, really, just in terms of how it's unknotted a lot of the complexities around this question of what's your charitable purpose and how does that take precedent, because everybody's super clear on who's doing what and in what space. And I think it's also unlocked the potential within the commercial team to really be able to maximize what they can do. And we've sort of started to you get that like internal language where people sort of understand the business model. And it's emerging all the time. And there's this really interesting thing, like everybody here knows that our enterprises team can make £30,000 a week off the Grand Hall. So you know that if we want to put a show in the Grand Hall, you immediately have to knock £30,000 per week that show is running out of the budget. And then it costs us another £30,000 to put a seating rake in. So there's this like pre-show cost that we know and we understand, that you can then be much more transparent when people say, oh, you don't do much programming in the Grand Hall. And it's like, well, going back to how much funding we get, we don't get enough funding to cover the costs of a week in a Grand Hall to put a show on. So it's quite a simple equation that unless we get corporate sponsorship or unless we make more commercial income, we can't program in that space. That's not to say we don't program, it just means we program other spaces and we try to put more content in there, and we try to pivot and reorientate what we're doing to those spaces. So I think that's probably, that has felt like it's really enabled us to put the charitable purposes at the core of what we do and make the building work around that and make the commercial team feel like they've got real agency to build and grow what they can do within a set of parameters that they're really clear about. And I think that's really been the ticket for us. And it's because we've got a big building and that's what allows us to do that. But that is really, I think, been, at the moment, feels like the secret sauce to me.
It's so interesting kind of hearing kind of both of your kind of perspectives on this, because I think for a long time, kind of my reflections in the sector have often been this idea that commercial needs to fund the thing, and actually I think what I'm really hearing from both of you is that this isn't about a binary, this isn't about an either or it's about a cycle that exists in order to kind of keep us moving forward. And it sounds like the kind of products or programs or the kind of work that you're doing there really clearly feels very, how it's really integrated. You've both spoke a lot about, both from the beginning, right from the start of this conversation, about how important it is to have these brilliant teams in place who really kind of drive these things forward and really get it. And because I'm conscious that a lot of our audience today might not have buildings, and so but I think this question of kind of bringing the team on this journey is a really, really interesting one. And I'd love sort of your experiences and your perspectives on that, because I think regardless of whether you're developing something in a building or, Peggy, your product, I know there is an in-person element, but the online, that's not building specific. But I think what is interesting, Amy, especially from your kind of zoning project, that could, in different hands, create a very siloed organization, right? You could kind of create that, but clearly that is not what is going on for you over at BAC. And I'd love to sort of hear from both of you about that process of bringing the team, both the commercial team, those that are physically driving the development of that project and those targets, but also the rest of the organization on this journey of really understanding why these development of this kind of work is important and how you kind of get them into that cycle, and any reflections you might have on how you've kind of got your teams there, or other than the fact that obviously we know you've got brilliant teams, but what as the kind of leader of those organizations, how has that kind of happened for you? Amy, do you want to start with that one?
I mean, a lot of it comes from, I think there's something about how you structure your team in a way that they are in a room together as much as possible, because I think it would be very easy for it to just become a thing over there. So we've got our operations meeting, our weekly mop up of delivery of everything that happened last week, includes everybody, and it's every single event, everything that happened in the building is reviewed in a space together. Our leadership structure involves the commercial director as an equal decision maker with me and the artistic director, so that I think really, really brings in those sort of three perspectives on how an organization is really doing. And then I think, I mean, we're in an open plan office. I can't speak highly enough of open plan offices. I have to say, it sounds like a really like pedantic small thing, but even when I was at ACE and you'd go to organizations and you'd see the ones that all sat in a room together and the ones that didn't, and it did feel very, very different, and the way that they worked felt different. And I've definitely felt that here at BAC. Like we all sit together, we eat lunch together, and we do things together, and we have social events together, and it's a joint team with a joint business model, and everybody understands what everyone else is doing. And the other thing that happens here, which I've always really loved, and it was happening long before I got here, and I've just like gone, I love this, let's do more of it, is that people will sort of be moved between the charity and the commercial teams. So we'll sort of say, do you know what, that person there, their role actually has the potential to generate more commercial income. If we put them in the commercial team, then that skill that they've got could be maximized, and vice versa. That person who's doing those hires is doing really brilliant work with the community, so why don't we put one foot in the charity and one foot in the commercial? And so we really kind of try to think about people's skill sets, and the fact that we have a commercial team here who are very entrepreneurial, I think really helps the creative team and the fundraising team and the marketing. Like, they think in a slightly different way because they're all working together, and vice versa. A team coming in with really strong charitable purposes changes often the way that the commercial team approach things. And then finally, I'd say it's those shared groups within that are really important and need to be given enough space to work across both teams, which is like your finance team, your people, HR team. I'm saying teams a lot. We've got a big team here, and I'm very, very cognizant that a lot of organizations don't have those massive teams, but it's the same principle of like, what are the shared resources that we need to have, and how do we make sure everybody feels like, whether there's 3 of us or 100 of us, how do we feel like everybody is part of the decision-making process, part of the evaluation process, part of the future planning. Yeah.
It's really interesting. 'Cause it's sort of that clarity of everyone having their own individual reason and clarity on what their role is, and making sure their skills are maximized, you know, they're really able to kind of get the most out of that from an individual perspective, but also having that sort of democracy of thought and democracy of purpose, which means that everyone is doing what they're doing, but also feeding into that kind of wider goal. Peggy, what about your perspective on how the kind of teams have come together to kind of push this side of things forward within NCW?
Dream answer from Amy, to be honest. I mean, a lot of that chimed in terms of, giving people agency and a channel and a means to contribute and feel part of the wider conversation, and to really own their area of work and understand it, and understand how it fits the broader NCW picture. And that's, in some cases, it is down to sort of, what would you say, sort of the mechanics of how we do that. We offer shared Slack channels, or we have a matrix that accounts for everything happening in the building. We have team meetings so that, again, everybody's brought along and knows what's happening. We now do a weekly team email so that everybody knows exactly what's on, and that includes sort of the commercial activity in the building. It isn't just the artistic offer. Again, as a way, in our case, of ensuring that people understand. I'm sort of straying into Amy's territory here, but understand the huge amount of work going on in our commercial area. It's smaller than Battersea, but it's a big fundamental piece. I think in terms of NCW Academy in particular, the sort of growth of that program has been really interesting, because initially I think it was in its very early days, there wasn't really a dedicated growth plan. It was a very much a proof of concept. Like I said, it was to see if it could sort of support the means of its own production, and it was really after COVID that the sort of demand, without any huge additional effort on our part, I think the demand just grew in such a way, for very obvious reasons, that people were from home, and we recognised that needed to become a bigger part of our work. And with that, we needed to grow the team differently. We had to upskill the team around it, and that's taken years. That wasn't the work of moments, obviously, but it's now a very, very shared endeavour, NCW Academy. So obviously, you've got the program team lead on, the kind of the core delivery. What are we delivering? Why? How, the monitoring and evaluation, and using all of that to feed the program, and to listen to what people want, and what they what courses, what genres, what tutors, what themes, and so forth. They lead on the sort of dynamics with the tutors and with the participants, and onboarding, and the great amount of work that goes on there to make sure everybody's happy and knows what's what. But obviously the marketing and the comms support to make those courses, to package them in the way we have, to share that they're there, to meet target against that work, is no little job. I mean, so that's huge. We have a weekly meeting around this topic, just to assess where we are, against target, to look and see what's going well, what needs more support, or more needs improvement. Then the operations team equally are as important in the mix too. They look after the building. As we've said, some of our stuff is also in the building. So they kind of make sure that we're welcoming, that we're signposting, we're bringing people into the space and making them feel a part of things. So in that sense, it is quite a global effort. And in terms of even that, it is an ongoing conversation with our commercial team, and the sort of the program and comms teams, as to what happens where and when. It's a lot of booking and juggling, and making sure that some of the bigger pieces, the flagship pieces, are in the diary in good time, so a wedding can't come into stray. But I think from my point of view, it's just making sure that the team has that they all have the chance to understand what they're working on. And actually, it's front of mind, because we've got an all team meeting after this, and we've got our commercial or events manager is going to give an update on her work, and her how she got on last year, what the plans are for this year. And that's really, really important, that the wider team, to ensure there aren't silos, and to ensure it's a wider conversation, and people understand the value of that, and how it sits within that. So a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's that sort of constant. Well, it is. I mean, that's the thing with in leadership roles, right? Isn't it? It's that constant care and that constant sort of listening piece. I wonder if we could sort of pivot this conversation to the kind of other side of commercial income generation, which obviously is the market and the people that are paying for these things, because we've talked so far about the kind of internal mechanics of these things. Both of you have kind of talked about that idea. I think Amy used the phrase kind of refining and refining and refining to kind of that point. Peggy, you've spoken quite extensively about kind of market testing and responding to what's needed. And I think, for those in our kind of audience today who might be kind of starting something like this from scratch, I think it'd be really useful to kind of hear about your perspectives on what is crucial when going out there with these things and kind of testing. So Amy, from your perspective, what that refining process has entailed and what your learnings have been there. And Peggy, same with you too, sort of what that testing is, and both from the starting point, but then also that kind of ongoing dialogue that you're having with your audiences to ensure you are kind of maximizing that potential. Amy, would you mind sort of giving us a bit of a perspective on that, please?
Yeah, sure. I really think it's incredibly important, and I suppose I say this both from what we've done here at BAC, but also when I've worked with other smaller organizations, and sort of particularly things like touring organizations that are perhaps don't have a building, and are sort of thinking about, well, where do you set up new income generation streams from, when actually your bread and butter is a very specific thing that has a very particular model. And I think, not to be really boring about this, but I think you have to do a really good market analysis piece. And I think if you don't have the skills in-house to do it, it's like, well, where can you get it from? So, for example, one of the easiest things to do is to recruit a new trustee, is to actually go out and say, do you know what we want to do is set up a commercial trading arm, because we think we could do so. For example, I've worked with a touring company who now have a really successful model of running team building, stage fighting, team building workshops, and it's a really good bit of income generation for them. They had no idea how to go about that. So one of the first things was like, okay, so who's on your board that could help you? And if you haven't got someone on your board, who might you be able to get? So you can have that kind of volunteer time of people that know how to do the market research. What's your differentiation piece? It's all like the kind of MBA business talk, but it's actually incredibly useful to just do that bit of work, desk-based research, before you embark on something, because you can use up so much. You've got such finite resources and finite capacity, and you can just splurge it all on something that's never going to work, because there's 15 other people doing it really well and you're not going to compete with them. So and that's, I suppose, in a sense, that's a version of what we did here. Was like, there's plenty of nice venues in London that you can go and hire. Why would you come to this one? Well, so what are its unique aspects? Well, where it's positioned, it's the South London venue. I think we found out it's like the biggest square cubic meter space in London that isn't full of seats. It's got no pews, it's got no, there's nothing in it. So you can build from scratch in it. And that's a really massive plus in London, because there aren't many places. And when you start to realize things like that, whatever it is in your business model, in your organization, that is your unique skill that you do, which is exactly what writers said. Well, it's exactly what you've done at the National, I keep saying Writers' Centre Norwich, because I'm so pre 2017. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, what are we good at? Well, we know what we're really good at, and therefore let's deliver that as an income generating part of our business, as well as our charitable mission. I'm just a firm believer that every arts charity should, if you don't have a commercial trading arm, what could that be? Even if it's tiny, what could it be? And where do you do the research, and how do you find out exactly where you could really sweat an asset that you're perhaps not sweating? And it's probably the skill of someone in your team, probably, if you don't have something physical like a building.
Brilliant. Peggy, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. As Amy says, I mean, I think, I guess advice. I think start slow. Like, don't don't build a really risky budget based on targets that aren't achieved. You've got to run before you can walk. As I've said, NCW Academy's been a very long road and a very sort of managed growth. Of course, COVID, as I said, had a really incredible impact, but we're coming down the other side of that now, and cost of living and all sorts of other challenges. I mean, I love a good old pestle. Sort of look at what you've got and think about what, how you can model it in a really careful and stable way, and not put yourself at any risk there. I think in terms of, if you don't have an obvious lever like a building, or that you're trying to organizationally trying to think what might your offer be. In our case, I think we're driven by this holistic idea of what's wanted and what's needed. In our case, for us, this revenue is needed, but I think that the courses are needed. I think they're a really positive offer to what's quite a busy and increasingly crowded market. But I think we've tried to create something that stands on is unique, is a really, I think, really special offer, and that hopefully brings people in at one level and helps them travel through on a journey with us. It's not, it's not just one door and then one and done. I hope it'll create an environment of belonging where people, access us via one resource, but maybe continue on a road with us. I think, as Amy said, it's about having the right people around you and understanding what they might offer to you. That's certainly something I continue to think about in terms of what we do here. But also, recognizing that something that might be working, yes, could be working harder. So for example, we've got our cottage on the campus here, as we say, and that's mostly through funded residencies, through partners all over the world, to bring writers and translators to the cottage to stay for usually between a week to a month with us. But we identified that we had a bit of downtime, that the cottage wasn't in use typically in the winter, and so we've offered that now as paid residencies to people who might, more along the Arvon model or the Moniac Vore in Scotland model. So just identifying what do we have that others might usefully want to use, or that we could use differently. And I think just listening. I mean, we've done a lot of I guess market testing, but surveying our participants, speaking to our tutors, providing spaces for reflection and for evaluation, and sort of really trying to create a model that's both resilient and flexible, that a menu that we can continually adapt and play with, and yeah, just try and not repurpose, but really allow it to sort of listen to what people want and to use it in that way.
I think it's really interesting what you kind of both saying. I think, we're going back to that sort of initial part of our conversation about making this part of that cycle that is driving your purpose, when it is an inherent part of it, because it's come from who you are, what you have, and it's just sort of a natural, rather than a kind of, it's a driver of the real work, then doing that work in terms of reflecting with your audience, talking to your, whether it's your commercial audience or it's your pay what you can, or it's the same audience that is enabling you to be who you are and to further the purpose that you are set up to deliver, right? And then therefore committing that resource. I think Amy, you said it, pumping that resource into where it's needed. If it feels naturally part of who you are and part of that purpose-driven approach to why you exist as an organization, then it's going to become a lot more easy to sort of justify those resources at a time when, we don't have a lot of resource.
And I'd just add as well that actually, just going back to the very first question about like how you fit it with your organization's purpose, there's also that, how much do you need? Like, how much money, what's the gap in the budget? Because you don't need to make any more than that. You don't need to set up a multi-million-pound commercial enterprise business. You need to plug the gap. And actually, so you also need to almost like tailor how much you're going to push this. It needs to be like within that. Like, I know the gap in our model is £300,000. That's what it is. We're not going to get that from the Arts Council. That's very difficult to get from trusts and foundations. It's a huge ask on major donors. Therefore, we have got to somehow grow our income generation to meet that number. Now, there's a ceiling on that. That doesn't mean and sometimes I think the perception can be, oh, you're just commercializing everything. You're just all about, it's like, well, no, there's this money that we have to make. I mean, that's on top of what we already make. So, it is a gap, but if you put a number on it, it suddenly becomes like, okay, so That's probably achievable. And if it isn't achievable, you're in a whole different ballpark about whether you have a viable business or not. So it's just that sort of keeping a lid on, not allowing it to be something that takes over, because it's not an infinite amount of money that you need to make. It's a specific amount of money to deliver a specific charitable objective. And I think as long as you keep that at the core of what you're doing, then you can really stress test when you're starting out on that journey. Is, if our gap is £10,000, is this a thing that could get us to there, even if, like Peggy says, it takes 5, 6, 7 years to get there? If you're modeling that, then you're demonstrating yourself as a kind of long-term going concern, and you can move incrementally towards that number. And I do think we're in a position where funders and stakeholders and philanthropists understand that that's where we are. And if you can be really transparent about it, and you can talk about what the number is, and you can talk about how you're getting there, then people will, if you're a good charity doing good stuff, I think people will trust you that you're on that journey.
There's a sort of balance question for me as well, isn't there? And there's, to me, that key word is about a balanced business model, because what we don't want to do is what I think has possibly happened in the last kind of, and not through anyone's fault, but just because of the way it's gone, is we've sort of maybe pivoted too much to rely on fundraising will fill the gap. Okay, well, that can't be fundraising, so other income's going to fill the gap. No, I don't think that's what we're trying to say here. It's about saying, instead of one, you're not going to find a silver bullet to fill the gap or fill the hole. It's about going, what is the balance over the next 5-10 years, and how do we, meaningfully build that, rather than just, because if you're relying on one single source, you're just sort of putting a finger in the dam. And we all know how that's kind of gone for the sector until this point. Peggy, is there anything on that you'd like to add at this point?
Just agreeing, and just, I think for us, I think as a sector, literature, there's if you've got a venue, great, then a lot of what you're doing is based on your ticket sales, your venue hire. But I think for us, we're hearing that audiences and participants want a different kind of program. They want to be able to participate differently. Their habits and tastes have changed. That's partly post-COVID. They want and expect different things, and I think that's just such an enormously exciting and positive opportunity for us as a sector to think, yeah, well, what could we do? What could we bring? In our case, we're just now getting the building open to the public in a way that it never has been before. We've never been a venue that you could well, back before we were custodians here, it was a museum for a spell. But as NCW being here, you can't just walk into the building until now, and you can. And what does that mean in terms of giving a different ownership and inviting people to support us in different ways? I think there's a lot for us to learn and explore there. And it's just really exciting. I think sort of the period we're in, it's lots of challenge, but lots of opportunity to think differently and do differently.
Brilliant. We're actually coming to the end of our time together. I feel like I could probably sit with you both for another few hours and dig into your brains on all of this. But alas, I have to let you get back to your incredibly busy jobs and wrap things up. So I wonder if I could just ask you one kind of final question, which is just sort of looking ahead for this side of your business models, but also for your business models in general, kind of what your kind of hopes are, I guess, or your kind of intentions for the next few years, and what you'd kind of like to see both for your organization and perhaps for the sector in a sort of wider sense. I think we've touched on a lot of that already, but just to sort of wrap us up, I always like to go first. Amy?
Go on then. What do I like to see? I think when I think about our model, and I think about the things that we know we need to do, like, I know we've got to put some retractable bleachers in our grand hall, because if we did that, it would be transformative for the business model. Finding £500,000 to do that is on top of everything else. That's not in the target, that's not in the model at the minute. And so I'd love us to be, I feel a little bit like we're in a world where there's a lot of people trying to find solutions. So, and I know there's countless conversations going on about how do you inject some capital investment, or how do we fix this, how do we change them, and I just feel like the one size fits all doesn't work anymore, and just some way of being able to actually draw down a level of investment into your business that allows you genuinely to pivot, which might not be built capital, it might be digital capital, for example. We got funding from Fidelity a couple of years ago and are just finishing a massive digital transformation project. And it truly is transformational because the capacity that it's gradually unlocking within the business is allowing for some of that kind of entrepreneurial, innovative thinking within the staff, because some of those processes that used to take forever are, the time is being cut down. And so, but that money is really hard to come by. And it just feels like sometimes we're thinking about these sort of huge shifts in, well, if there's 900 MPOs, how can we all get enough? How can we all get a slice of the pie? How do we change it? It's like, well, maybe actually some of us could really change our business models if we just had £500,000 to do X. And if that was a bit easier to come by. And I think that would be my, how do you put it? How do you find a way to really surface the organizations that absolutely have nailed what their business model is and have a really, really robust, rigorous plan to go forward, and let them unlock a bit of money to start on that journey? Because then you might ultimately, and there's lots of different ways of doing that, but then you might ultimately unlock some money for those organizations that aren't in that position and can't do that yet and need a little bit more public subsidy.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, maybe one day.
Maybe.
We'll keep working towards it. Peggy?
Here. I vote for that. Second that motion. I don't think I've got an answer, Vicky, to be honest. I mean, I think it's sort of, I don't know, there's so many factors that make it feel like we're looking through a glass darkly still and all. I think the next few years are going to continue to be fluctuating and for all sorts of reasons. But I think for my part, I mean, this is the manifesto I dined out on in my job interview, as it goes. But to build something that's fit for the future and open to all is really where I'm at with what we're doing here. Unfortunately, Keir Starmer talked about fit for the future and open. It hit the week after my job interview. I felt very saddened by that. I felt, but I think it is. I think it's how do we future-proof ourselves as organizations in all of the ways that we've been talking about in diversifying and broadening our basket of support, in innovating in what we're doing, in doing the thing we do really brilliantly well, and making a really strong case for what we do in the right places. I think that's a big piece as well. And I think, it's about sort of planning for the worst and hoping for the best, and doing what we do to the best that we can. So, but yeah, I would agree with Amy in terms of digital infrastructural stuff. We've just completed on a new website, and that's been seismic. So, there's lots of different ways that change can come to your organization. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate that. And I know that sort of last question, especially looking ahead, is a bit of a gnarly one. So I really appreciate you both for your openness and your honesty today. And it's been really interesting. And I'm sure lots of our viewers have really appreciated the kind of food for thought around how to really balance those models, and really thinking about how to look at your own organization as an individual sort of entity, and what you've got and why you're here, and how you can use that. So thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who is watching. We really appreciate your time and your energy, and hope there's something for you to take away into your own organizations and pour back into the sector with all the incredible work you do. If you are watching on the 16th of April, and Achates colleague will stay online for the next 10 minutes or so. So do pop any questions in the comments, or you can always email us directly, and we are happy to chat. As I'm sure, or I hope many of you know, Achates is here to support the sector, and we do this in lots of different ways, ranging from strategic business planning, feasibility studies, recruitment support, from development positions to CEOs and trustee roles, and organisational change work, helping to transform your boards, your teams, whether that's through new hires or supporting in other ways through, for example, succession planning. We also offer a range of fundraising and income generation support, including strategy development and bid writing. And as the sector continues to navigate financial challenges and this increasing pressure and competition for funding, we are going to be working with companies to help them consider their unique organisational assets and the routes to leverage these to develop earned income streams, a little bit like we've been talking to today, to add value whilst also furthering your purpose. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if there is anything we can ever do to support you. As mentioned, the next session will once again be a collaboration between Inspires and Live, focusing on that question of ethics within our income generation and business model. So keep an eye on your inbox for more details soon. Thank you so much.